everybody, I'm Alyce-Kay Rucklehouse from Threshold of Hanani and the Widow Rucklehouse, and this is going to be one of those random videos where I'm just talking about something that's on my mind. Excuse me. I wanted to talk about people saying you're too sensitive. And I say you because I'm talking to the people who, like me, have been told that we're too sensitive. I'm not talking to the people who go around saying that somebody's too sensitive. At first, I worried about doing this video because I thought, oh no, what if I hurt somebody's feelings who says that people are too sensitive? And I thought, no, because if their feelings were hurt, that would make them too sensitive. So I'm not going to worry about them. But this isn't to put them down or anything either. And I want to start out by saying, when I was thinking about this, I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube. And every single one of them, and I think that they're not completely right, every single one of them said that when people say that you're too sensitive, that's abusive. I do agree that it's hurtful and that it's not correct, but I don't think that it's usually malignant. Not malignant, malicious. And so I really would hesitate to say that it's abusive. I guess you could technically say it's abusive, but we've gotten to this place in our society where we say everything's abusive and everybody's a narcissist if they don't do what we want. And people are gaslighting and stuff. A lot of times that behavior is gaslighting. Like my friend and I were just talking the other day about how, like, if you say to your kid when he falls and he's hurt, oh, it's okay, you're not really hurt. Technically that's gaslighting because you're like invalidating their feelings, but you're not doing it out of maliciousness. You're not doing it to be mean. That's a lot different from gaslighting for the purpose of making someone think that they're crazy. So it may have the same effect, but it's not intentional. And I think that we really need to draw that line when we're talking about people who say that you're too sensitive also. It was, like I said, 100% of the videos that I saw. Now, I didn't see every single video on YouTube, so there may be some that don't say this, but every single one that I saw was like, oh, that's so abusive and blah, 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 blah. And I agree that it has the effects of being abusive, but I do not agree that everybody who says you're too sensitive intends to be abusive or is trying to bully you or hurt you. That is the effect, but that's not their intention. For some people, it is their intention. So you have to watch out for those ones. But the other ones, let's talk about it. So I want to help you. If you get called that a lot, if you get told that a lot, I want to help you to think through it because it's taken me a long time to get to where I could think through it. And I think, you know, I'm 61 now. I think that it was maybe in my 40s that I finally figured a lot of this out and started not listening to people who said that and knowing that they were wrong. But I guess I kind of figured there's two reasons why I wanted to share this. One is because I saw so much on YouTube that said that those people are being abusive. And I would like to be a voice who says that's not necessarily the case. I think that's too quick to judge and it's putting people into boxes that aren't helpful. The other reason is because I figure if you're attracted to me and the things that I teach, it's probably because we have some similarities. We probably have some very similar personalities. And so probably a larger percentage of the people who watch my videos than the people who watch someone else's videos. More of my followers are probably the ones who would be called too sensitive. So since I've been able to think through this, I thought as an older person, I could pass on a little bit of what I've learned, hopefully it's wisdom, what I've learned and figured out to those of you who are struggling with that. So one of the things that really helped me to recognize that people weren't necessarily right, but they weren't right when they would say you're too sensitive, was that I was accepting that. And I felt like I had to accept it because there were several people in my life who would say you're too sensitive. And I don't remember how many people, maybe like 3 or so, or maybe 5 or 7 or something. I don't know. I think it was probably less than that. But it felt like everybody was saying that because there wasn't anybody saying, wow, it's wonderful that you're so sensitive. And so and also I think that we tend to, or at least I tend to, hear the negative things that people say more than the positive things. And I also think that people tend to say something negative rather than something positive. You know, it's like people who say, oh, I'm just telling the truth. It's invariably something bad that they're saying. And if you stop and ask them, oh, do you think anything good of me? Well, yeah, of course. Well, do you tell the truth about that? So no, you're not telling the truth. You're telling a partial truth. And that's a really important point. But anyway, so since I kept being told, usually over and over by the same people, that I was too sensitive, I figured that they must be right. You know, it's like it's 3 against 1 or 5 against 1 or whatever. And so I must be the one who's wrong and they must be the ones who are right. And one time it occurred to me that I had more than 3 friends. I had a whole bunch of friends. And none of them, other than these 3 or 5 people or whatever, none of them were telling me you're too sensitive. It was just these particular people. It was the people who kept hurting my feelings with what they were saying. And I realized, okay, just because a few people say this doesn't mean that they're right. And I asked a few of my friends, do you think that I'm too sensitive? And who knows if they're telling the truth or not? A lot of times people don't tell the truth, but they all said, no, you're not too sensitive. Why would you say that? And some may have thought that I was sensitive. I don't know. But the thing is that just because a bunch of people say something doesn't mean that it's true. Here's one thing to recognize. If you allow bullying behavior, whether it's intentionally bullying or not. And I think that a lot of times it's not intentionally bullying, but it has the effect of bullying because it pushes you down. It makes you feel bad about yourself. You feel small and you cry. That's a good indication. If you allow that thing to happen to you, and I'm not saying that you have to fight back, but if you allow that to go into your heart, then you attract that kind of person. And so if you allow people to say, and you believe them when they say you're too sensitive, you're going to attract more people who say you're too sensitive, because what you've just done is it's like you put this bullseye on your head that says, bully me. You know, especially in this area. And so even people who aren't trying to be mean, they're going to be attracted to you because the kinds of people who say mean things and who say you're too sensitive are the alpha kind of people. Not necessarily bad. I'm not trying to put a judgment on them, but just to say they're different from you. And so they are always going to be trying to be the top dog. And this is one of the ways that they do it, probably without even thinking. Usually without meaning anything bad, but it does have that bullying effect, even if that's not what they intended. And so, you know, if you don't work through this, if you don't try to get to the bottom of it for yourself, not necessarily with them, because I honestly don't believe that it helps to talk to them about it, but you can, and I have tried a number of times. One time, I thought that the person responded really well, but then about a week later, she came back and said, no, I decided you're wrong. You're really just too sensitive. And I thought, okay, well, all right. I think as a Christian, I should try to work through it, but it's kind of wasting time. And it also, I think, causes more bad feelings for both people. So sometimes it's better just to say, okay, we have different personalities. And so maybe I just shouldn't hang out with that person. Maybe they're not best friend material. So anyway, so just because more than one person says something to you does not mean that it's right. And there can be people who are sensitive and people who are not sensitive in the same world without either one of those being wrong. And that's one of the things that we need to get through our heads. Is just because people are different from us, and it goes both ways, just because people are different from us doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that they're different. And you can't be friends with everybody in the world. So look, you know, have the kind of friendship with that person where you're not going to get hurt and where you're not going to feel like you have to yell and scream at them because they're beating you up. But don't make them your best friend. You know, choose other people who don't hurt you to be your best friend. I hope that makes sense. So one thing that I had to really stop and think, because I guess the way that I always felt after somebody said that to me, and I still do feel that initially when somebody says that to me, I have to stop and think about it before I stop feeling this way. But I used to think this all the time, and there was no relief from it, was that there was something wrong with me, that I was too sensitive. And I couldn't figure out how I was supposed to change that. You know, people say, oh, you need to grow a thicker skin. Really? How do you do that? How do you grow a thicker skin? And I should also mention that about a year ago, I started really recognizing that I might be autistic. And so then a few months ago, I had that confirmed. And I just found out watching videos about this, that that's a really common thing for female autistics to be called, is too sensitive. Now that doesn't mean that because people call you too sensitive that you are autistic. It's just one more thing, that if you are autistic, then that could be part of the reason why this is happening. And that it is really common. So one of the things that I had to stop and think about at one point, when I had just been called too sensitive so much that it was destroying me. I mean, it really literally was destroying me, because I thought that there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know how to resolve it. And when I would ask people who said that I was too sensitive what I should do about that, they would either laugh at me derisively, or they'd say, just grow a thicker skin, or just let it roll off your back and stuff like that. And it's like, how do you do that? And especially for an autistic person, and I didn't know I was autistic at the time, we can't figure those things out. That's just, those are kinds of nuances and stuff that we just have a very hard time understanding. And I kind of think that even if you're not autistic and people say that to you, is there a way that you can become not sensitive? And here's the question is, would you want to become not sensitive? Maybe so that you don't get hurt so much, but think about the people who are not too sensitive. They go around hurting people, right? Is that what you want to be? No. And that was one of the things that I had to come to realize, was basically what that person was saying to me was that I should be more like them, you know, because we all kind of have the tendency to think that we're the person who's perfect and everybody should be like us. And if they're not like us, then they're wrong, right? And so, yeah, so it was like they were saying, you're not enough like me, you need to be more like me because I'm the perfect person, kind of thing. And if you're a person who says that to people, stop and think about it. I mean, isn't that really what you're saying? You think that we should be more like you. And I'm not going to say that that person should become more sensitive. That would be the same thing. I'd be saying you should be like me. I really think that God has created people very different from one another. And so we have different temperaments and everything. There are some people who do use it in an abusive way, and they do intend to abuse. And it's kind of a gaslighting thing. You know, they do or say something that's really mean. And then when you call them on it, they say you're too sensitive because they're trying to bully you. But I'm not really talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who say it not meaning to be mean. They just think I don't think that they would say you're bad. They might, but I don't think so. I think that they just think, you know, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I'm just joking around or something, when they say mean things. And so, you know, they don't want to be, they're offended. They are offended, definitely. They're offended when you tell them that it hurt you when they said that or when they did that. And they don't want to have to confront that. And maybe they don't have the tools to confront it, just like I didn't have the tools to confront being called too sensitive. So I guess the first thing to ask yourself, and if you're going to have a conversation with the person who's saying this, which to be honest, I've learned there's not much point. But if for some reason you're going to have a conversation with a person, is to ask them, why do you say that I'm too sensitive? And don't accept examples of things like, well, because you get hurt when I say such and such. Say, what is the scale or the, what's the perfect thing that you're trying to judge me by? And it'll come out to being like them, basically. And so then, talk about that a little bit. Or if you're just thinking about it and not talking to them, which is what I would probably advise, think about, do you want to be like that person? Should you be like that person? Should you want to go around joking about things that hurt people's feelings? You don't have to be friends with everybody in the world, and you're not going to be. So you don't have to be unkind to people who aren't your friends, and you can be friends without being really close friends. It's not that you have to be enemies or anything like that, but probably if you're a really sensitive soul, then a person who's insensitive is not going to be your best friend unless you pretend to be something that you aren't. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to that you have to pretend that you're not sensitive. And I'll tell you where this takes you. It'll drive you insane. It really will. I had a very close friend in high school. He was older than me, and we were really close friends, but we would spend a lot of time sending insults back and forth to each other, and it was just like this contest of wits. And it was kind of fun in some ways, but I always went home and cried. And I don't think he did. I think he just enjoyed it, and he probably had no idea to this day that I went home and cried and that I was hurt by it, because I didn't say that I was hurt. At that time, I didn't tell people that it hurt my feelings. And if I did, for some reason, tell them, or if I just started crying because it was too much, then they'd always say, you're too sensitive. But it's like there came a point when I realized I don't really want that kind of friendship. I don't want to be torn down all the time, and I don't want to be tearing somebody else down either. That doesn't make me feel good. And I remember I read a verse. I want to say it was in Galatians, but I can't remember exactly where. And again, I'm not saying this to say that anybody's bad, but it was what really convicted me about this behavior, was where it said, be careful if you're always biting and tearing at each other, lest you consume each other, something like that. And around that same time, I looked up the word sarcasm. It actually means to tear flesh. And I thought, and I was in high school at the time, I thought, okay, we're supposed to be building up the body. So how is tearing flesh building up the body? And so that was when I decided that I would do my best not to engage in sarcasm. Now, have I always been successful at that? No. But I really, really try, because I don't think sarcasm is a good thing. And yeah, it's okay if you disagree with me, that's fine, but we're probably not going to be the kinds of personalities that get along well, and that's fine. You probably have, if you're that kind of person, you probably have friends who are like that, and you guys genuinely enjoy tearing each other apart, and you don't get hurt by it. But it's equally valid for people like me and like others. And I think it's often women, but it's probably a lot more men than we think. It's just that men are even less likely to admit it. Men who don't want to be tearing each other down find it very exhausting and not encouraging or loving. And so, yeah, we don't want to behave like that. That doesn't make us wrong. And I'm not condemning the people who like to do that. Like I said, I'm not using that verse to condemn people who do that. I'm using that verse because it convicted me that I didn't want to be like that. And I've been a lot happier since I stopped doing that. But it's like, you're going to become like the people that you hang around with. And if that's not the kind of person that you want to be, don't spend your time hanging around with them. That doesn't mean you can't be friendly with them. It doesn't mean that you can't, do group things and stuff, but it's probably not somebody that you just want to spend hours and hours talking with, because you have different values. Okay, so that's one thing about it. Another thing about it is that because there's not really, as far as I know, there's not a way for you to become less sensitive. I have never found actually somebody who could tell me how to become less sensitive. They just tell you need to be less. It's kind of like saying you need to be a man instead of a woman. Not that men are always insensitive, but I'm just saying it's like saying you need to be a fern instead of a woman. It's like, I can't do that. And unless you can tell me how to do that, don't keep saying that. But because I didn't realize that they were not right in telling me that I was too sensitive, I faked it. And so I tried to pretend like I wasn't sensitive because I thought there was something wrong with me because I was sensitive. And so I would smile and put up with whatever they were saying and stuff. And then I'd go home and cry, and I'd just be really, really hurt and really worn down and torn down. And I've learned that's just not worth it. If you can't be your authentic self around a person, then they're probably not supposed to be your best friend. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to be unfriendly to them. If they can't be their authentic self, which is a really, witty person, I think that's how they say it, is witty. If they can't be themselves around you, then you're probably not best friend material for them either. I'm saying it goes both ways. It's not just a one-way thing. So anyway, so I just wanted you to think about those things. I wanted you to think about when somebody calls you too sensitive, stop and think about, why does it seem like they're saying that? I mean, not the situation in which they're saying it. They're probably saying it because they said something that hurt you and they don't think that you should be hurt by it. I think in a lot of cases, in the non-malicious cases, I think a lot of times it's just because they don't stop and think about it, or because maybe they do think about it a little bit and kind of wince and they go, well, I don't want to take responsibility for the thing that I said being mean. And so I'm going to say that you're too sensitive, and that can be done in an abusive, bullying way, but it can also just be done as a knee-jerk reaction that we all kind of have to defend ourselves and to not want to own up to what we're doing. And so, and in those cases, you guys, it's not abusive. Please don't call it abusive, because then I think that's abusive. I think it's abusive when we say that someone's being abusive when they don't have malicious intentions. Abuse is malicious and it's intentional. And we belittle those people who have actually been through abusive situations when we call something that somebody just does as a normal human being and a sinner, like we all are, when we call that abuse. So don't. Sorry, but I'm so tired of everything being abused and everything being narcissistic and everything being gaslighting. And, technically a lot of times it fits that, but it's not meant that way. And there's no way that we're going to ever have peace and unity if we just go around thinking that anybody who hurts us is abusive. So I just want to ask you to watch out for that. So in the case of those where it's just kind of a knee-jerk self-defense reaction, they might, if they're a very thoughtful, self-examining person, they might come back to you and apologize for that. It's not likely, because being thoughtful and self-examining is more the traits of someone who is too sensitive. It doesn't really go along with that person who has a harder skin, a thicker skin, and who can let things roll off their back. So yeah, it doesn't really do any good to talk about it, because you're kind of talking two different languages. And I think it's really important to not become defensive either. And this is why I say I'm not sure that it's worth talking about with a person like that, because it's like inevitably you end up having to say, you're bad and I'm good. And they're going to do the same thing. You're bad because you're too sensitive and I'm good. And you can pull out Bible verses for these things too. And that's not okay, because it's just this condemning and not accepting each other. Should we accept sin? No. But I think a lot of times it's not meant as sin. It's not intentional. It's not them trying to be mean. It's just that you have a different disposition. So it's like, just like we would like them to accept our disposition, I think we need to also accept their disposition. But just realize that your dispositions are so different that you're probably not cut out to just spend a lot of time together. And that's an okay thing to realize. But you can still be friendly to each other. So I think now I'm starting to repeat same things that I'm saying. Um, I might at some point think of something else to say about this. I was going to write down notes about it, and I felt like it would be better if I just went off the top of my head. So anyway, if you have any questions or thoughts about this, go ahead and put it in the comment section below. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if this was helpful to you, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. This isn't the usual kind of video that I make. I think about every once a week or once every 2 weeks or so, I make a video that's just like random like this about something that has nothing to do with other stuff that I do. But feel free to check out the rest of my channel if you want to. And I hope that this helped some of you. I hope that some of you will let me know that it helped you, that I'm not the only person out there like this. Anyway, so I love you. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.